Again, welcome to this evening's Camden Conference program. I am going to turn the program over to Camden Conference President, Matt Storn. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Julia, and welcome everyone. We've got a terrific turnout. This is, as Julia said, another event in advance to our 34th annual conference, the Geopolitics of the Arctic, a Region in Peril, on February 20th and 21st. Tickets for this live streamed event will go on sale on November 30th through our website, www.camdenconference.org, where you'll also find our terrific roster of presenters for this conference. Again, this year, our moderator will be David Brancaccio from Public Radio's Marketplace show. David's a native of Maine, and he did a terrific job last year. Many of you know, here in the Mid-Coast, there are many fascinating and talented folks, and Peter Ralston is certainly one of those. He's been, by his own description, a photographer all his life. He grew up in Chadds Ford, Pennsylvania, hometown of another couple of famous Mainers, Andrew and Jamie Wyeth. Peter and his wife, Terry, opened the Ralston Gallery in the heart of Rockport Village in 2011, and that he sells his photographs there as well as the work of his lifelong friends, Andrew and Jamie Wyeth. Peter is also the co-founder of the Island Institute in Maine, a terrific organization. So tonight's presentation is based on a trip that Peter took to the Arctic in 2016 and is called, suitably enough, Arctic Observations. Peter, the virtual rostrum is yours.
Thank you, Matt. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Julia. And hi, everybody. I was cheating and looking through all of the little screens, and there are a lot of familiar faces, so you know who you are, and hi. This is really a pleasure and certainly an honor to present this. This is near and dear to my heart. I'm going to click now, Julia, on the share screen thing. Okay, so you can at least look at this while I'm doing a little bit of a preface. Set the stage, an upfront plug. We can't do a show of hands, but I do that when I'm doing this in person. You might want to make a note here. I cannot recommend highly enough the film Chasing Ice, an award-winning 2012 documentary making comprehensible climate change as quantified by ice. It's a brilliant film. It's available on Netflix, Chasing Ice. Some of the places we visited, in one place in Greenland, relates to that film. The other thing, if you have paper and pencil handy, Elizabeth Colbert wrote a piece in the October 24th, 2016 New Yorker, A Song of Ice, What Happens When a Country Starts to Melt. I cannot recommend it highly enough. I'll be quoting from it a little bit tonight. Stupendous piece of writing. So we have an hour to cover a lot of territory. Many of you know how difficult it is for me to keep the story short. So I'm on task here. And as Julia said, we welcome questions. She's going to sort of curate the questions. We'll go through her, but I welcome them along the way. Having said all of that, this is not a lecture or a presentation about climate change per se. These are really just observations from 2016's month-long trip. I am not an expert on any of this, but I've long been really interested in this part of the world. I remain passionate about what I saw there and learned, and hopefully we'll see more of it one of these days. You simply cannot go where I've been up there and not get it, speaking of climate change. I feel driven to share this. Speaking of sharing, this is not a plug. Matt kindly mentioned the gallery here in Rockport, but I do have an Instagram account, Peter in Maine, and there's the website ralstongallery.com, and there are more images and some narrative and some of my writing there. So let's go. Rose Hardy, and hopefully you're looking at her, is a 189-foot aluminum-hulled yacht launched in 2006, formerly owned by Rupert Murdoch, bought by a friend 2 years before the trip. So for this cruise, we had a crew of 13, 2 local guides, and a legendary, probably the world expert on ice, an ice master and pilot. The original plan was a 2-month exploratory cruise from Greenland to Nome, but a situation occurred in the owner's world back in the States while we were still in Greenland, so plans changed considerably. Instead of 2 months, it was a month. Instead of going all the way through to Alaska, which we could easily have done because there was no ice, we stayed in the heart of the Northwest Passage. So a geographic overview. We flew out of Rockland. There was nothing scheduled about any of this. This is private plane. Can you all see my cursor? I hope.
Yes, we can.
Good. Okay, thanks. We first flew here to fuel up the plane so the pilots could get back that night. And you'll see, I'll have a few slides of where we were there. And then we flew an additional 400 miles north up to the head of this 120-mile fjord, met the boat which was waiting for us. And then we'll see the map again later. So here we are flying over the absolute southernmost end tip of Greenland. My first view of the fabled Greenland ice cap. And this was July 25th, keep in mind. It just didn't look healthy. As New Englanders, as Yankees, you know, we know what rotting snow and ice looks like. And even from the plane, it looked like distressed, rotting snow, ice. So we landed in Quersurasuk, and I'm going to murder some of my pronunciations. I apologize up front. The first European population was the Eastern settlement here in the late 10th century. This is where Eric the Red landed. And we were amazed. I mean, it was green. We were warned to wear lots of layers. So when we got out of the plane, we would be warm. We couldn't peel clothes off fast enough. It was 70 degrees that day. There was lots of green there, although ice still covers 80% of the island. It was there in our first hour. I mean, while they were fueling the plane, we went across the fjord to where Eric, where there was early settlement. And we started, this is when we really started seeing things. So here's a reproduction, a replica, if you will, of an early Norse chapel. This area has been the site of a lot of archaeological digs and research. And I'm going to quote just briefly from that Elizabeth Colbert New Yorker piece. So reading from that, as Greenland warms, the record of the Norse settlements, along with any clues that it might yield, is being erased. Quote now, this is a researcher talking, back in the old days, these sites were frozen most of the year. When I was visiting South Greenland in the 1980s, I was able to jump down in the trenches, guys had left open from the 50s and 60s. And sticking out the sides, you could see hair, feathers, wool, and incredibly well-preserved animal bones. End quote. A graduate student who started working in Greenland in 2005 found at the same sites mostly decomposing mush. I mean, these are all Arctic observations. I mean, once you get there, the evidence is everywhere of rapid change. So anyway, leaving there, we flew 400 miles north to Kangerlussuaq, where Rose Hardy awaited us at the head of this amazing 120-mile fjord. Down we came the fjord. It was like steaming along the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I should note that we were, although Rose Hardy is a famous sailing boat, won big races and all this business, because of the danger of ice, we could never once raise sail. So it was powering the whole way. Yes, contributing to global warming by very fact of running the engines. But because there was ice, we really had to be careful, her being a thin-skinned aluminum boat. I'm going to skip Sisimiut. We're running now up the west coast of Greenland, headed north. We stopped briefly at Sisimiut, the second largest city, population over 6,000, just over. A lot of fishing, shrimp, salmon, halibut, cod. Advanced plans for an Alcoa aluminum smelting plant. Tourism is definitely growing there. Witness our presence and several cruise ships. But here we are leaping ahead to Ilulissat. You can see the cruise ship out there. And this town was just unbelievable. This is where it really started getting amazing. This is where the ice gods dwell. This is where it all started becoming transformative for me. Ilulissat means icebergs in Greenlandic. There's fishing here. All these little boats down here. These are boats that they used to run between the shore villages. But this is all about hunting. This is a hunting culture in transition, certainly, but fishing and hunting. These guys were great. The truest warmth there in Greenland was not the 70 degrees, but it was the people were just very, very warm, very embracing. Guy setting I think he was going for halibut. Cod. And this is a typical larger fishing boat out of there. Further south, a little further south of Sisimiut, they had 250-foot shrimp boats. All the shrimp that we have lost here because of warming temperatures in the Gulf of Maine, they are just, there's a huge shrimp operation there. So here's one of the tougher observations, indicators, if you will, of climate change. As recently as 1995, Ilulissat had more than 8,000 dogs. Now only about 2,000. These are not pets. These are Inuit, Greenlandic sled dogs. They're big, beautiful, very powerful animals. There were once 8,000. Now there are only 2,000. Another index of global warming goes like this. If there's no sea ice, there are no seals. No seals, no hunt. No hunt, no need for dogs. And quoting from the New Yorker piece, dogs no longer seemed worth the seal meat it took to feed them. Many were euthanized. Those which remain are used mostly for sport. End quote. The mayor of Ilulissat said, the last time we had ice we could use for hunting was 1997. Think about it. The Inuit are shooting their dogs. They could no longer feed them. That to me was one of the saddest, most tragic personal indicators of rapid climate change. An early 18th century missionary to Greenland discovered that the native people had no word for bread, so he translated the line from the Lord's Prayer as, "Give us this day our daily seal." So the big draw, the reason that Ilulissat is now a World Heritage Site is there's the Jakobshavn Glacier at the head of a 25-mile long ice fjord. So here's the little harbor that you saw illustrated a few minutes ago. If you can see my cursor over on the left, that's the little harbor. And here is this enormous fjord at the head of which is the fastest moving glacier in the northern hemisphere. And if you look, I don't know, I hope you can see some of these numbers. At the mouth of the fjord is a moraine, a gigantic gravel bar, basically, dropped in 6000 BC by the face of the last, when all this was covered with ice. So there's basically a gravel bar there, which keeps trapped all of the ice peeling off the face of the glacier up here. In 1850, the face of the glacier was here. 1875, accelerating. 1902, 1929, 42, 53, 64. Here we go. Strap on the seatbelts. 2001. And then look at this. Spring of 2003. Summer of 2003. Summer of 2004. 06, 12. It's now up here. In the past 15 years, the Jakobshavn Glacier has retreated more than it did in the previous century. Since the 90s, the glacier has nearly tripled its pace. It now advances at annual average 6 feet an hour, this glacier moving forward. Even as it's melting back, it's advancing at 6 feet an hour. Just in the past 4 years, more than 1 trillion tons of ice have been lost. This is 400 million Olympic swimming pools worth of water, or, and there's so many ways to parse this, enough to fill a single pool the size of New York State to a depth of 23 feet. The very largest icebergs there, and here's what the really big ones look like. I mean, these are huge. This. And what happens is the big ones, 75, 80% of which is underwater, they're hung up on that glacial moraine, the gravel bar. So they're stuck there, often for years, until they melt enough to float free, and then off they go in the Labrador Current. So all of this is behind there to give some sense of scale. You saw the picture of Rose Hardy at 189 feet with 200-foot mass. If Rose Hardy, if we'd been suicidal, crazy enough to park her alongside us, Rose Hardy would have looked like this with mass at 200 feet, just reaching the top of that. Some of these glaciers, it is computed, weigh 100 million tons. So, yeah, this is the very mouth of the ice fjord. So we chartered a helicopter at one point and went up to look at another glacier, flying over it. I mean, here is the Greenland ice cap. From here, due east, it's, 600 miles across ice at a depth of, in some cases, 2 miles. But like I said before, you can just see it rotting, flying over the heart of it. It's rotting at the very edges. It's rotting, and the water is just pouring off of it. So when you see, and I sure hope you will, Chasing Ice, the money shot, if you will, in Chasing Ice is a scene shot from this exact spot where these little sort of high-tech igloos are research bases for scientists. The shot in Chasing Ice is of the face of the glacier. Now it's about 8 miles away, from here. In 2012, it was 6 miles away. And these guys got on high definition video with sound, the largest single calving event ever recorded. I can't remember now. I think it was over about 40 minutes. But basically, it was ice, a face of ice the size of Manhattan, just peeling off the face of the glacier. It was the size of Manhattan, except it was 3 times taller than the tallest buildings in Manhattan. It's very hard to understand scale. Even when you're there, it's just so big, but anyway, I could go on and on. I know I'm supposed to do this all in an hour, so I'm going to press on. But when you see Chasing Ice, this is where it all happened. And we're looking very touristy. Where we played on, ran around on the very edge of the glacier then 4 years ago, that's all gone now. That's moved, maybe half a mile back. I don't know. So I'm going to read from the New Yorker. Elizabeth Colbert wrote beautifully about what she saw there. And I know that she saw some of the exact same icebergs that we saw when we were there. She writes beautifully, quote, "Towers of ice leaned against arches of ice, which pressed into palaces of ice. Some of the icebergs had smaller icebergs perched on top of them, like minarets. There were ice pyramids and what looked to me like an ice cathedral. The city of ice stretched on for miles. It was all a dazzling white, except for pools of meltwater, that fantastic shade of popsicle blue. Nothing moved, and apart from the droning of the mosquitoes, the only sound was the patter of water running off the bergs. Waterfalls coming off them. That's how fast they were melting. Remember, it was 70 degrees. A month before we got there, where we picked up the boat in Kangerlussuaq, it had hit 75 degrees, which at the time was the highest recorded ever in Greenland. So even though this particular specific ice drainage area is smaller than the one in Greenland's northeast, there's enough ice in it alone to raise global sea levels by 2 feet. This evening, this was about 10 o'clock one evening, we left the big boat, went off in a Zodiac, just kind of tooting around, and there were 3 humpbacks. Remember, this is the land of the midnight sun. This is 10 o'clock at night. This was the first time I ever smelled a whale's breath, which I loved. This was at midnight sharp. Way back in the background is Disco Island, and between us and the big island is Disco Bay. So we're leaving Greenland, and we're heading across Baffin Bay to Canada, northern Baffin Island. And this was no low boogie operation. We were spoiled rotten. Rose Hardy is just an extraordinary ship. She's more than a boat. She's gorgeous. This was the lower steering station, the library and salon, if you will. It's not what I'm used to here in Maine, that's for sure, on Raven. This is where we would often eat. Here's the crew. We're all just looking at sort of home movies at this point. This was the hot tub that I think perversely pleased my wife, Terry, when she heard that we would not be hot tubbing it up there. It was the sort of the down cellar. It was the vegetable locker. So we would find ice. There was always ice to find, and we kept everything cool up in the hot tub. So I'm afraid to make this bigger. I might lose this. I hope you can see this on the screen. This is not the really finely detailed Canadian ice maps that you want if you're navigating through. This is a big picture stuff, obviously. But this indicates where the sea ice was on July 25th, the day we arrived in Greenland. And here it is 3 weeks later. Check this out. 3 weeks later, August 18th. That's how fast it was going that year, which is, of course, tragic in so many ways, but made it possible for us to do this trip. For those of us that like messing about in boats. This was sort of an interesting note on all the high northern charts. You know, forget it on the magnetic compasses. Of course, we had lots of electronic gear, but we're up there. And I should mention, back when you saw the, let me see if I can go back for a second. Here's the fjord where we picked up the boat, and the Arctic Circle is right here. So, you know, we're well above the Arctic Circle at this point. So this is our very first glimpse of northern Baffin Island. We're in Canada now. And the very first thing we see are hanging glaciers. Glaciers that once came to the sea. You can see the moraines, the gravel that they dumped here as they were melting back. But glaciers melting back from the sea, becoming the sea. So our first Inuit village, Pond Inlet, made quite an impression. These villages are really up there. You know, at this point we're 400 some miles above the Arctic Circle. I don't have time tonight to go into a lot of detail, my impressions of, and you know, facts, figures, and so forth about the Inuit villages. I was deeply, deeply moved by them. They were, as the sign said, really wonderful people, despite just atrocious, literally atrocious treatment at the hands of the Canadian government over many, many years. Reconciliation and reparations are being made, but these are tough, tough places. Made some wonderful lasting friends up there. In the very background there too, behind the boat, is Beachy Island, which has the highest polar bear density in the world, apparently. And I went for a little walk. First time we came ashore, first thing I saw was a bear nailed on top of this guy's hunting sled. This is one of only 2 pet dogs we saw the whole time we were there. Dog food costs hundreds of dollars a bag. So absolutely nobody feeds their dogs. It's a great luxury to have a dog, but they are fed only, you know, seal meat and bycatch from the hunts. Caribou. There's real pathos there. These people are the masters of survival in the harshest climate imaginable. There's a great dignity as well. Tough places, tough places. Anyway, I was loving it. Here's a double midnight sun. This was at midnight. It's really hard to get a sense of scale there. Everything is so big. I had no idea beforehand. We've left Pond Inlet at this point. We're off exploring up Milne Inlet. And we had heard that there were, that the men of the village were out narwhal hunting. And we heard periodic rifle fire. We were up there staying in touch with some of these guys on radios. We didn't want to disrupt their hunt. To give you some idea of, well, to give you some idea of scale, as I made this, we had a polar bear swimming in the water not far from us. And can you guys see this little thing down here? I'm afraid to zoom in. I'm terrified that we might lose the whole flow of the show here. But this little tiny thing here are 3 guys out, Inuit out whale hunting. So we're right in the middle of a narwhal hunt, polar bears swimming by. And this is, we've only been in Canada for, you know, a day and a half. This is where things really, for me, Greenland was the big ice, transformational. But Greenland, Canada was something very different. It was people, it was wildlife, and it was this huge towering landscape. the Milne Towers, and I had written down, I don't want to lie or misrepresent, but these are like 1,800 feet high, as I can recall, coming straight out of the water. And the fathometer showed hundreds and hundreds of feet in the water under us. It's really just amazing, beautiful, stark, gorgeous, tough land. So here we are. We poked around for quite a while there, the northern tip of Baffin Island. This is pretty much the last we saw of Baffin Island, and a really tragic but powerful indicator of climate change. The Canadian government once had an artist commissioned to come and paint this scene, basically, because it was the only place on Earth where 7 glaciers side by side ran into the ocean. And it's a Canadian stamp and so forth. If you look here, only one of them still makes it to the sea. And now I know that has melted back. So none of them, they're all in full retreat. So we've crossed now Lancaster Sound ever further north, and we're bumping along the southern coast of Devon Island. We got a chart coming up here in a little bit. I'll show you where that is. But Devon Island is the world's largest uninhabited island. It is truly extraordinary place. Just an amazing place. At breakfast, right after this, we saw this bird roll. I'm going to bring you back to this little cairn up here in a few minutes. We took off from the boat, a few of us in a Zodiac. We were exploring around, if you will. Again, it's hard to imagine scale. The indicator here on scale is this is a large muskox. So all of this goes up, I think it was 1,200 feet, just straight up. So we had to go back to the boat for a little while. Then a few of us came back, and I wanted to find that muskox. It was the only one we saw in the whole trip. So we went back looking for it. There were tracks everywhere. And here's some Arctic cotton in the foreground. There was, I am not an expert on scat, whether this was caribou or muskox. I could not tell you, but I was intrigued by these gorgeous little flowers existing against, all imagination in this incredibly harsh environment. So on my hands and knees doing my Peter photography thing, and all of a sudden, right in front of me, there's a bumblebee. I thought this was, just unbelievable seeing such a thing. I photographed it. This is another indicator of climate change, rapid climate change. After I came back from the trip, I read, I think it was in the Times, a piece about a scientist at University of California who is heading the Bombus polaris, the scientific name for the polar bumblebee project, transpolar or transarctic. And I thought, well, I wonder if she could use this observation. From the ship's log, we had, time of day, lat long, temperature, and all that business. So I sent her this picture. It turned out it was actually an important sighting. It was a piece of really useful information for them. They are using the expansion of the Bombus polaris range, of course, to track climate change. Like a lot of species are expanding their ranges, the bees among them. I will point out in passing that she was really a character. She was a right piece of work. In getting back to me, she reported that this was a male Bombus polaris, and she snidely pointed out that snarky. I thought, point out like as in most species, the males are generally scruffier. So there we have that. So now we're up where that cairn was. This is still all Dundas Harbor on Devon Island. We're up at the cairn that I showed you a few minutes ago. And here's an old Royal Canadian Mounted Police outpost, one of the very northernmost. And we went to visit it, but first we stopped. Oh, somehow this got out of order. So here's the outpost. Oh, I know what I did. Yeah, so I was in there looking at all of this, and one of the crew shouted, "It's a bear, it's a polar bear." They stated this quite colorfully with a great deal of excitement. It was a really big polar bear swimming right onto the beach where we were. And the bears that we saw 13 bears on the trip. 12 were clearly, I want to say starving. 12 had clearly not eaten in a long time. And that's because the ice is going, and with it the seals. No seals, these guys don't eat. So we start, the bears are definitely, hey, see the slack jaw? And the guy, this is watching this bear swim ashore not too far from us. You'll notice on the left, our guide, first rule up there, the bears are very aggressive now. They don't like people, but they are starving, and we start to look better, therefore. So you have to be really, really careful about the bears now. So here is that bear. It is swum ashore. This is from the Zodiac. I kept bugging the crew, and they were very kind. They tolerated me, and they actually let me go back. A few of us went back ashore. We were armed. I just wanted to get see if we could get pictures from the bear from a safe distance. So there it is. We were probably 120 yards from it at this point. It was very much aware that we were there. We stayed together, presented, ourselves as best we could. It's a large creature. I'm running late on time, so I'm gonna fly through this. We actually found that there were old tent rings there, the sign of hunting camps, tent rings. And the bear at this point is like somewhere right up here. It was this shallow lake. And as I was kneeling, trying to steady myself, getting pictures of the bear, I looked down in the water, and here's this bone. And I had absolutely no idea what it was. I reached down, picked it up, and it completely baffled me. Our guide, great guy, but he wouldn't let me bring it back because this was an archaeological site due to the tent rings. We could not figure out what this thing was. Nobody aboard knew what it was. We had connectivity that far north, believe it or not. So I emailed Donnie Perkins, who's a great friend, who is the founding director of the Gulf of Maine Research Institute, and said, "Do any of your people, can anybody possibly identify this bone?" It was big. It was clearly a jaw. Anyway, it turned out it was the lower jaw of a sea turtle. They're southern turtles, warm water turtles. How did it get there was the next question. Well, it became clear that it had been brought north by whalers who, the whaling ships would catch turtles. So they had fresh meat. And it was here on this island, 500 miles above the Arctic Circle, where 19th century whalers basically cooked up a turtle with the Inuit that were there at the time. Anyway, spent a long time in that story. I will accelerate. I'm trying not to do my usual Peter thing. Here we are in Croker Bay, still Devon Island. We only saw 2 seals on ice the entire time we were there. This is a ring seal, and these are just on little bergy bits, chunks off of glaciers at the head of this bay. We didn't see any seals on, that's the same ring seal. We saw no seals on sea ice at all. And there's a bearded seal. So these were made sort of tooting around on a Zodiac with some of the crew. And we were really disappointed. Inadvertently, we had broken off each of those seals. They were about 1.5 miles apart. Each of those seals, it turned out, had a bear going for it. And our being there in the Zodiac broke off their hunt. This bear, no, that bear had just swum ashore. There's a long story behind this. I will spare you. Another one, that was the other one that had broken off its hunt because we were there. Again, Baffin Island. We're headed west now. The only walrus that we saw, and the only of the 13 bears that we saw, this is the only one that had clearly eaten recently. If you have eaten most of a seal, it shows. And that was the case with this one. So to refresh us, we left Ilulissat over here, here, steamed across. This was 2.5 days into Pond Inlet. We explored up in here a little bit. The 7 glaciers that were that I showed you, what was left of them, were here. Here's Dundas Harbor, where we saw the muskox and the bear and so forth. We're steaming along here. This is where we interrupted the bears hunting the seals. And we're headed for Beachy Island, which is, yes, Beachy Island is a little tiny island here. And it is famous primarily. It's a stark place. As the first wintering site of the 1845 Franklin expedition. Franklin left, I'm racing through this, but Franklin left England in 1845 with 2 ships, Erebus and Terror, and 129 men. They all died, ships were lost, and I'm going to go back for a second. So here's Beachy Island. The Franklin expedition was all about, like so many before and after that, finding the Northwest Passage. It was a dismal failure. It really, for the time, was like if we had sent a crew to the moon and they had crashed and died and were lost. It was that terrible and monumental an event for everybody. So there were many searches for 170 years. People have been trying to find what became of them. There was evidence of Franklin's men abandoning their sleds, and there was evidence of considerable cannibalism, all sorts of stuff. And it was only, on September 3rd, that year we were there, and September 3rd, they finally found Franklin's second ship here. They found the other one 2 years before us over here. Anyway, pretty interesting stuff. So this, on Beachy Island, are the first of Franklin's men to die. 3 of his men died, and a crew member on a subsequent rescue or search mission, of which there were many, trying to find Franklin. This is almost a holy place in the high Arctic. There was a rescue station built there. A lot of canned. These are old cans. Coal that was brought. I have to rush through this, but it's a very heavy place. So what are we doing here? So from Beachy Island, we're steaming over to Resolute, where fuel had been stored for us, cached for us. We fueled up. I'm going to show you a bit of Resolute. And then we decided the owner was no longer with us, the situation back in the States. So instead of, it was here in Resolute that the decision was made, rather than go all the way through the Northwest Passage, which we could have done because there was no ice, that we would simply stay here in the heart of the Northwest Passage. Many would say the best of it. We would circumnavigate Somerset Island. So that's what we're about to do. I'm going to show you Resolute and our circumnavigation of Somerset. I better pick up the pace. I'm doing my usual Peter you know.
You're doing fine. You're doing fine.
Well, thank you. I don't know how many people are dropping off yet, but I'll try. So here we are in Resolute, which is really the northernmost supply base station for the high Canadian Arctic. The thing that just amazed me here, I didn't get to see it. I so wanted to see it. Was they land 737s on gravel strips up here. Everything comes in either by plane or boat up there. This is really, we're really up there at this point. And I should point out too, I had no idea the extent to which this part of the world really is a desert. It is a high Arctic desert. Although there's snow and this and that, some of these hamlets, these villages, are getting 5-6 inches of precipitation a year now. Shell Ann and her kids, she's the wife of the senior Canadian Mountie up there. These kids were great. The one on the left never made eye contact, never smiled. The other two were just, they were really great. So still in Resolute, I was walking around town just down the hill from Shell-Ann's house, and there was a dog barking off to the left. And I saw these polar bear skulls. So I went over to have a little look. This guy comes out. We were chatting. And yeah, this is the last thing a lot of seals ever see. And I remarked that this one intact skull all the way to the left was a big one. And the guy says, you want to see a big one? And there was a strange smell. It turned out the guy was cooking polar bear heads in his backyard. There's something I had not seen before. We simply don't have enough time to get into the whole social aspect of the Inuit there. I wish we could, but it's not a happy story. Canada treated its native peoples like this country many years ago, perhaps some would say still do, treat our native people, the first people. And the evidence, the stories, the reality is pretty amazing. Not tonight. We are many, many, many hundreds of miles above the tree line. The only trees up there are these Arctic willow. This is a very old Arctic willow, and this little the center of it here, the main trunk, if you will, is only a few inches above the ground. This is an old tree. So here's a nose hardy. Never seen anything like this before. And we were out char fishing, the Arctic trout, of which we ate a great deal. We were called back to the boat because the wind was moving some ice in, and we had to move right away and move fast. So we have nowhere near enough time to explain the intricacies of these ice charts. They are fascinating. So we were up here. Because of this, we had to get going out of where we had been char fishing, which was here. Now, if you will remember, this indicates down here very little ice. There's some ice, but very, very little. This is where it starts getting problematic. So we steamed through for a day and a half. Here's our ice guide, Patrick Toomey. There's a strait in Antarctica named after him. He is the ice master. His whole life has been running icebreakers and studying ice. So we were all hands on deck. There was some sea ice. Here we are, just sort of going along. And this is as much sea ice as we saw the entire trip. This is 500 miles above the Arctic Circle. This is all we saw. So as you recall, I mentioned we were going to circumnavigate Somerset Island. The idea that we would press on all the way to Alaska was out. We were circumnavigating Somerset. We're running south down the east side of it. And our guides knew about this really awesome place. I did not know. I wonder how many among us this evening knew that beluga whales are the only mammals that shed their skin. And what they do is they come into these shallow coves. Some of them are quite big coves, really bays, but shallow ones. And they like to be at the surface. This is in 6, 8, 5 feet of water. And they roll around, abrading their skin off, the epidermis off on these sharp Arctic rocks. And back in the mid-19th century, 3 English whaling ships trapped an enormous number of beluga whales in there. Belugas producing the highest grade whale oil, and they killed and rendered into oil many, many hundreds, if not over 1,000 beluga whales in this spot. All this white stuff that you see are bleached bones of beluga whales. It was a haunting place. I'm glad to note, though, that beluga whales are doing very well population-wise. So thanks to some Inuit friends we ended up making in Resolute, we were allowed to visit their hunting camp. And this is really sort of a classic, actually pretty well developed Inuit hunting camp. They land twin otter, they land planes on these beaches to resupply, and we're really out there. We're far from much of anything. So we're pressing further. There was a little bit more sea ice. So this is actually at midnight. As a photographer, I can never get enough light. So I was in hog heaven with light 24 hours a day. So you'll notice here where there had been ice on the last chart I showed you, it was clear. So we're now steaming down here to Fort Ross, which you'll see momentarily, and the Bellot Strait. And the Bellot Strait marks the southern end of Somerset Island. It also marks the very northernmost, I forget the name of this, I think it's the Boothia Peninsula, I'm not sure. But this right here is the northernmost land in continental North America. It was a very cool place. So here's the Fort Ross, which was a Hudson's Bay Company post established in the 30s. It only lasted, I think it was the last Hudson's Bay post established, I'm not sure. It only lasted 11 years. It was just so far north. It was slim pickings, so they closed it down. The trading post is over on the left, and the house where the men lived is on the right there. So this is the house. And I always think I'm being very funny when I point out that this is not my son's dormitory room in college. This is what happens when bears get into a place and cast around a bit. So we knew this was coming because we were on the radio and whatnot. This is an old Soviet spy ship that they called weather stations. All of a sudden, it got really busy up there. Here was this spy ship that is now they use these to go to the Antarctic and the Arctic. These are tourist vessels. These are sort of environmentally based tours. So there was that, and the only large commercial ship we saw the whole time we were on the Canadian side coming through the Bellot Strait.
Peter, we actually had a question come in about tourism. Could I ask that of you?
Sure.
So Jolene asks, there's such a push to build a tourism industry with a focus on seeing these disappearing places. And we can argue that it's, quote, educational, so people will grasp climate change. but it often feels like climate porn or an indulgence rationalized as education. Your story and photos are powerful and effective. How do you feel about the growth of Arctic tourism, and what are the trade-offs as you see them?
So that's a great question. I would first, I will couch my answer by deferring to the Inuit. This is their land. It's their world. And as you know, Western civilization has done what it's done to the atmosphere and so forth and so on, without getting on a whole rant about that. Our actions have affected their world. And yeah, absolutely. Tourist porn, environmental porn. I mean, that's why Ilulissat is, you know, a World Heritage Site. People are going to see this glacier. People want to see the big ice before it's gone. And going through, you know, places like this, the Inuit, let us not forget, are the supreme masters of survival. And as we have trashed the environment, and it has incredibly negatively affected their millennia-old ways, they're adapting, because that's how you survive. So they are, you know, they're using modern technology to hunt and so forth and to get along. They're also going to make money off tourism. And we here on the coast of Maine know what that's all about. So it isn't even bittersweet. It's tragic what's happening there. But it is what it is. That's a terrible phrase to use these days, as we all know. Mm-hmm. It is going, but working to service tourism is going to be part of their survival. This is a small boat here, and they can go into some of the relatively, you know, smaller harbors. That summer that we were up there was the talk about a climate change indicator, running from west to east. There was I forget her name, the Crystal Lady, or, you know, some god awful Crystal, I don't know what the name of the boat was. But from west to east, with 5,000 passengers, a big cruise ship, you know, with casinos and, you know, the whole bit, ran through that summer. That was the first cruise ship through. So, I mean, it's all going to change a lot, environmentally, socially, and so forth. And as it opens up, you know, there are enormous, colossal global economic ramifications. If I don't have any of this in front of me, but ships transversing from, you know, coming from Asia to Europe can save 40% time and fuel, and which translates to money, by running across the top of the world than running all the way down to the Panama Canal and then back north into Europe. So there are huge forces, societal and economic forces in all of this. There are trillions of dollars worth of oil, gas, and minerals up there. And that's the big one. You know, that's the other big one. But that's the 900-pound gorilla, is, you know, who's going to extract, how is it going to be extracted, all of these resources? You know, is it all going to get trashed as we've so successfully done elsewhere? Thank God Canada's, you know, that this is in Canada and not, you know, left to some of us. Anyway, there's a long answer. I hope this, and this is just so skimming the surface of this.
Well, I think that a lot of those topics you just mentioned are things that are very much going to be covered, you know, during the Camden conference weekend. These are big topics that we're only beginning to discuss in these, you know, these community events that we're doing. Go ahead. I'm sorry. We have some more questions coming in, but why don't you continue with your slideshow?
Okay. So here we are, you know, feeling like we own the whole place, and all of a sudden 2 ships with people. There were other tourists, my God. And we had been feeling fairly proprietary about all of this. So anyway, here we are going through the Bellot Strait. So we're looking at over there at the very, very, very northernmost part of continental North America. The tide just rips through there. This is a seriously risky place to go through, particularly in a fairly large, not nimble, maneuverable, aluminum skin boat. All it takes is, you know, a chunk of old ice, not, you know, white ice that you can see, but the hard, you know, 50,000, 75,000 year old ice to hit us, and it would have opened us up like what opened up the Titanic. So all hands were on deck going through there. We've got a big tide running against us. There is ice in the water. There were watches. There were people out ahead of us in the Zodiac. And here, going through Bellot Strait, right there, it's actually this one right here, is Point Zenith, which is the very, very northernmost tip of North America. North America ends in a gravel bar. And everything I knew, you know, home, everything, Terry, off to the left going through there. It was pretty, it was a powerful place. So here we are back on the very northern end of Somerset Island. We're rounding the top of it, and we're headed back to Baffin Island. And the last of the 3 Inuit villages or hamlets that we visited, Arctic Bay, which was hands down my favorite. Population was about 900, I think it was. I really fell for this place. This wonderful big harbor, they call it the Pocket in Inuit, unpronounceable words for me, but it translates to the Pocket. And that's the whole village there. This is the fuel depot and whatnot over here. I just love this place. This is what downtown looks like. Church, school. And while I was at the school, I'm looking down at the harbor, and here's this guy who's got a gill net strung off the beach. And, you know, there were kids down there. They had a puppy, and there was, you know, the grandfather, the old guy cutting up the fish. And I figured, well, obviously he's netting up char, because that's what's up there. And so I went down to have a look, and this was a great scene. These guys were so great, and having a great time. But the shocking thing, and here it comes, total climate change indicator. These aren't char, they're salmon. Atlantic salmon have never, ever been up there. This is another species, you know, incurring into new territory as waters warm. As in the case of the bees, as the air warms. You know, when I got back, actually it was in Elizabeth Colbert's piece in the New Yorker, where she referred to the Inuit of northern Baffin Island, alleging that they were catching a few salmon. Well, allege this, you know, there it is. And I should point out the salmon, Pacific salmon, are coming in to waters on the west side of the western end of the passage. Now, this, believe it or not, is another indicator of climate change. This guy was Jaco was his name, and he came by when I was walking around in the town and sort of, want to buy a narwhal tusk? And we've been warned as, you know, American citizens. Canadians can buy, you know, animal parts, marine mammals, and bring them back into Canada. We as Americans could not. We were actually forbidden. I was put on special notice. Peter, don't even think about it. Don't be buying anything. So I couldn't buy a narwhal tusk, but he had a little short narwhal tusk. It's the inner, narwhals have 2 tusks. Who knew? and they have an inner tusk. And I will confess here and now, let me go to Eco Hell, but I bought it's about a 16-inch inner tusk from Jayco. And we hit it off, so we're driving around. He's giving me a ride around on his four-wheeler. And then he asked if I would like some muktuk. And I had been warned by our guides, if you are offered muktuk, it is a sign of respect. It's a nice thing. It's an honor. But you're never, ever in a million years going to be able to eat this stuff. It is the outer blubber layers from a narwhal. And but we went back to Jayco's place, and he gave me some muktuk. I offered to pay for it. He was almost insulted. The telling thing here is that he had to go inside and get it out of his freezer. The permafrost is melting. They no longer keep their food, their catch, their kill, everything in the permafrost. Buildings are moving around on their foundations, such as they were. The permafrost is going. He was such a great guy. So this is like hanging out at Hannaford's parking lot. Everybody's got, snowmobiles and four-wheelers and boats with outboards. The kids were just great. Didn't see a kid the entire time, walking around glued to, as we all are, myself included, iPhones and iPads and glowing screens. This is actually, it's funny, this is actually training. This is what they've done for centuries. Not with hockey sticks necessarily, and they loved our boats because they were fast and they thought they were very cool. This is a hunting canoe. They're very long, fast, beautiful boats, beautiful boats. And we knew this was coming, back to the tourism thing. Jolene's question. So Rose Hardy, we were the only private yacht in Arctic Bay to that point that summer. The only one. I mean, it's kind of out of the way. And this was the only cruise ship in there. I think she had fewer passengers than that Russian one. But again, it's ecotourism. We knew they were coming, so I have to admit, we ran ashore. We were already ashore several days before they arrived, and we bought carvings and Inuit art. Arctic Bay is known for its carvings, particularly. Beautiful, beautiful carvings. Basically, we got the good stuff before these guys showed up. But the Inuit, again, this is income. This is income. This is money in the bank for them. So they're totally torn. I mean, and I see a lot of parallels to that right here. Right here. Oh yeah, this was little Oscar. Oscar was trying to sell me another one of these. I told him I already had one. He was desperately trying to get me to buy another one of these narwhal inner tusks. What was it? This guy was so great. This is what, they sell these for a lot of money. They sell bear parts, animal skeletons, all sorts of stuff. They are adapting. They are adapting the change that we have brought upon them. So you will recall the photograph. We're getting close here, Julia and Matt. You have no idea. Oh my God, it's okay. So we're a little over an hour, I see. The wife of the back in Resolute, the wife of the Canadian constable, the mounted police constable in Resolute, had said, if you're not back this way, and if you go by Arctic Bay, if you play golf, they've got a golf course there. Oh, are you kidding me? I don't golf at all, but the second captain of Rose Hardy and the second engineer were both going on and on about what great golfers they were. So I actually, no kidding, was able to arrange this golf game. And of course, I showed up with my camera. So this is Victory Bay. It is across, this is several miles from Arctic Bay. This is where they bring, and Shelley-Ann had warned me that this golf course is where they cut up all their catch, their kill. You don't clean your catch, your kill in the village, because that is just bear magnet. The bears will come. So they do all that over here. So there were bears and bear tracks certainly all over the place. Absolutely beautiful place. They're building an aluminum plant further up off to the right there. There's a big aluminum plant going in. Look at the minerals up here. I mean, this is, again, trillions of dollars worth of oil, gas, and minerals up there. But anyway, back to Victory Bay, stunningly beautiful place. It's where they stage, the snowmobiles and their hunting sleds for when what ice does come back in. So that's all that stuff on the beach. There are several hunting, houses there. Just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place. And as promised, the golf course. So the three of us, the second captain, second engineer, and I went over, and there were these 10 guys we went golfing with. So you tee off. This is like teeing off. This is our second captain, Ian, teeing off. And here's our second engineer, Rich. And there were these 10 guys. This is one of the greatest times of my life this evening. They're a little on the cold side. Everybody's got jackets on and stuff. There's a little snow spitting later. This is about 9:30 at night. And so you tee off on this like AstroTurf. And there are 5 holes going down and you turn around and play the same holes coming back. And there are high tide rules, low tide rules. They're also it's very site specific on how you play. And this is the fairway. This is not the rough. This is about as good as it gets. And the one guy, Dominic, I said, Dominic, what kind of club is this? And he was the one assigned to carry, a really serious high power rifle in case, an aggressive bear came along. They also have rules that if they're in the bay there, if a whale, if seals, walrus, you name it, anything is spotted, they all, drop their golf gear and run for the boats, and they're on it. So there we are. There's Dominic and Ian. So here's part of, there were bear tracks all over, as I say. Here's part of, a carcass that, a bear had dragged around. Here's the hull, which is a piece of rebar beaten into the ground with a little orange construction webbing to flag it. This kid was great. So, hold on. Yeah, so here we all were at the end of the evening. I've stayed in touch with this guy, second from the right in the blue. We're actually Facebook friends, and he is the alpha hunter up there. I love these guys. It was a great night. So this is the wind up. If there's anybody, I see a few people are left. So without getting too heavy, but I can't help it, a few thoughts. So it's official. 2016 was the hottest year on record to point, the 3rd year in a row that the record had been set, and the record's been broken twice since then. In 2016, in over 6 hours, this is 2016, we knew who the participants were in that election. 6 hours of combined presidential debate, there was not one single question asked about climate change. With all due respect to everybody attending, our outgoing president has been an unmitigated disaster for, among other things, addressing climate change, which he infamously called a Chinese hoax. Unbelievable. I am now immensely heartened by an incoming president who believes in science and strategic responsibility. We all just saw it. I mean, right now, they're desperately, the present administration, desperately trying to cram through selling leases to explore and drill the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. I mean, just unbelievable. There is a spiral of silence around climate change. Reputable polls reveal that 2 in 3 Americans, 2 in 3, are moderately or very interested in global warming, yet the same polls indicate that 7 in 10 Americans rarely or never discuss warming and climate change with family and friends. So I ask each of us, each of you, to ask yourself, where do I fit into these statistics? So here's a local morsel to chew on, while it lasts anyway, and that would be lobsters, which are all moving because the water's warming, unless you want to substitute shrimp or cod or any of the other iconic but now gone populations. Since 2004, the waters of the Gulf of Maine have warmed faster than any other water on the planet, except for an area northeast of Japan. Well, I wrote that, a couple of years ago, and since then, it's all changing up there so fast, including right here. Couple this with rapidly increasing acidification due to carbon dioxide, and it's no surprise that a lot of our guys, our fishermen, are starting to really take this stuff really, really seriously. Flashback to the Inuit, ice, seals, dogs, bears, salmon. It's changing here. So I'm not here to play Chicken Little or scientist. Do your own homework, ask your own questions. Thank God, I think it's just stupendous that Camden Conference is focusing on this. Someday, and let each of us ask what we can do. It's never been more appropriate to think globally and act locally and globally. And I will leave you with this. After my first showing of these images, a friend locally sent me this part of a poem. The poem is Hieroglyphic Stairway by Drew Dellinger. And it kind of says it all, I think. I still get deeply moved by this. So here's the poem, part of the poem. It's 3:23 in the morning, and I'm awake. Because my great-great-grandchildren won't let me sleep. My great-great-grandchildren ask me in dreams, what did you do while the planet was plundered? What did you do when the earth was unraveling? Surely you did something when the seasons started failing, as the mammals, reptiles, birds were all dying. Did you fill the streets with protests when democracy was stolen? What did you do once you knew? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. And I want to personally thank you for so thoughtfully photographing your unique experience. I know that there's a lot of folks who go up there, and the particular eye that you gave your experience is something I think we're all very grateful that we just got to share with you. So
thank you.
Thanks. There's a few comments that came in and some are questions as well. So I'm just going to jump right into that. Karen says, this is from much earlier in the presentation, your picture of cod makes me sad. 40 years ago, I was in Newfoundland and saw a fishing boat full of cod, and they were huge, maybe 4 feet long each. What a change.
Yeah. And Newfoundland, of course, shut down the cod fishery, which was once the greatest fishery on the planet. And there was a moratorium. And when I was last in Newfoundland, a grandfather couldn't go. You had to hand line. There was no netting, no nothing. And you didn't see anything bigger than a, 20-pound fish.
Jane has made a reference to the Colbert article that you were referring to frequently. She says that Colbert wrote an amazing book, The Sixth Extinction, not sure if the New Yorker piece was an excerpt. Do you happen to know if it was from the book, The Sixth Extinction, or if it was?
I don't think it was, but Jane is right. I mean, Elizabeth Colbert is a great writer, and that's a wonderful book.
And Susanna was nice enough to put a link to that actual article, A Song of Ice. So thank you very much, Susanna, for including that. Dominic mentions the light in these captures really reminds me of Rockwell Kent's paintings of Greenland.
Yeah.
So a very similar light feature there. Let me see, where else? We had Paul points out that our last presenter, John Paul Caponegro, who's a photographer also, he had said during his presentation, if you explore here aboard fossil fuel planes and ships, then buy carbon credits too. And then he wanted to know, so how is the muktuk?
Inedible.
Inedible.
I was very grateful for it. Is John Paul asking that?
No, that was someone who attended his program as well.
Okay. Yeah, John Paul has made absolutely spectacular images of both North and South Arctic and Antarctic. The muktuk we tried. I tried. I really tried hard. Couldn't do it.
I'm sure it was very polite of you to do so.
But we baited up, knowing that there were salmon here in these waters that we're looking at right now, that there were salmon in there. We used it for bait. We were desperately trying to catch ourselves some salmon.
Sheila asks, she says, you've kept in touch with any of these people. Have you sent them copies of portraits that you took of them?
I haven't. It's a great question. I make such a point of giving photographs, prints to people who were kind enough to let me make images of them. I hope more than anything that I get back there one of these days. Tom, actually, the one guy in the blue suit, follows me on Facebook and Instagram, so he has seen some of this stuff. But it's a great thing for photographers to do, any artist, is to share with those who have put up with you.
Well, I know that there's a lot of people who are against social media, but for sure that is one way to link us all together globally. We can communicate easily through social media.
They rely on it heavily up there. It's really unusual. So all of the satellite dishes here, if you look at it, you see a satellite dish, they're tipped like this, right? Up there, they're all like this, aimed, due south. And yeah, that's how they stay in touch with the world.
Yeah, an absolute window to the rest of the world for them. Gail says, love this all, Peter. Thank you so much. Very interesting and inspirational. More folks saying, thank you, Peter. It was all I expected and more.
Thank you.
Dave says, wonderful images and stories. Thanks. By the way, I think 2020 is a turning point for climate conservation. Well, we hope so, don't we?
Touch wood.
Yes.
And to John Paul's point, those that are, we had two big German tank engines driving this thing the whole time. We were incredibly, almost painfully aware that we were burning a lot of fuel. We were putting a lot up into the environment. And my friend who owned Rose Hardy, another friend who had a big ocean going, world traveling, big motor yacht, contributed literally hundreds of millions of dollars to climate research at different universities and different research stations. So anyway, important stuff.
Yes, absolutely. This last question isn't so much related to climate change, but I'll ask this as our last one. Allison wants to know, did you get any sailing in?
None.
Oh.
No, we were legally not allowed for, the insurance companies and the Coast Guard Canada and Greenland. The fact that a boat like Rose Hardy, thin-skinned, soft aluminum hull, is up there is just extraordinary. It just would have been too risky to have any sailing. I will note that a friend of Philip Conkling's in mine, a guy named Gary Comer. He's no longer with us. He founded Land's End. He was the guy I was referring to a second ago who had a 154-foot motor yacht that he used to explore the world. He contributed literally hundreds of millions of dollars to climate change research. But Gary, I think it was 2001, Gary had Philip Conkling, some of you definitely know, aboard, and another good friend of ours from Portland aboard. And they were steaming up the west coast of Greenland. And Gary had aboard some of the world's preeminent geologists and climate change scientists. Gary was really into this stuff, big time. And so they went as far north as they could get before they got into ice, and they had to turn around. Philip and our friend in Portland flew back. So Gary's there, halfway up the west coast of Greenland, 2001, and he's looking at the Canadian ice maps. And he says, by God, I think we can do it. Let's go. And they basically headed west. And in 2001, they were the first private vessel ever through the Northwest Passage in either direction in a single season with no military or icebreaker escort.
Wow.
That was 2001. And now, 20 years later, 19 years later, there are boats like Rose Hardy, and there are people here in Camden and Rockport who have taken plenty of them, fiberglass boats, and gone up and done the passage. That's how fast it's changing.
Well, thank you so much, Peter, for lending your images and your voice and clearly your passion to this really important conversation. And thank you all tonight for joining us. And I encourage you to visit the Camden Conference's website, as well as the Camden Public Library's website, librarycamden.org. And you can find out about other upcoming programs about this very topic and from a lot of different perspectives. Again, I'll mention, in case you missed it at the beginning, we did record this evening. So if you would like to share this program with your friends and family, you'll be able to find it tomorrow on the Camden Public Library Program's YouTube channel. If you have any difficulty finding it, just email me and I'll send you a link directly. Again, one last time, Peter, thank you so much. We've had all these great comments coming in. People really got a lot out of this. So thank you for your time.
Thank you all.
Have a great evening, everyone, and see you next time.
Be safe out there.
Yes. Bye-bye.